We found ourselves in an environment where there's no system. We try to link up offenders, ex-offenders who might end up in the system or are at risk of ending up in the system to other organizations that provide direct support services.
So that is actually by now it's so much like a handful. Like I'm beginning to feel I was ready, but I was not ready. But in the interview, you've mentioned Article 48.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of pronounce it loudly in this interview, and because the reason as to why I requested you to grant me an interview is because I interviewed the parent from Through the Roof.
Yeah.
And so she mentioned about the system breakdown, and I found you through Article 48.
Yeah.
So I'd like you to explain to us what Article 48 is, so that somebody is able to marry you as an advocate of the High Court and persons with disabilities.
Article 48 was a baby that started in 2016, mostly because, I'll be honest, back in 2016, I was just a lawyer. I didn't know much about disability and human rights and all these things. But I was working in the human rights field, I won't lie. Then there's a case that came across Article 48 because it involved a person with a mental disability who ended up dying in remand. And it was just because the system chose to ignore him. He was denied his rights to a fair trial, which now ended up leading to his death. And that's why Article 48 was started. We specifically offer legal advice, legal representation, and legal guidance to persons with disabilities and around the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Because we realize how our prejudices and stereotypes and our own personal biases are affecting and creating harm on persons with disabilities.
So you left me here where somebody was denied their right and they ended up dying in remand. So are you able to explain the circumstances around that case, or do we just leave it?
So for instance, you know, when you talk about the criminal justice system, it's literally that, a system. And and in his particular case, it was complete system failure. Literally denial of all the rights recognized under Article 48. For instance, Article 48, the right to a fair trial, says that everyone has a right to be heard, presumed innocent until proven guilty, access to legal representation and legal aid where the person can't. For persons with disability, you have the right to expedited hearing and representation at the expense of the state, and accommodations to allow you to communicate and things like that. Now, this particular person, did he have a lawyer? Yes, he did. But it was a lawyer who didn't understand his disability. So the lawyer represented him as a common criminal rather than bringing the disability aspects of him, because essentially he was arrested for drug trafficking. What were the drugs in question? He was walking around with 3 months supply of haloperidol. He needs that. But because the police, the prosecutor and all of that did not understand what haloperidol is, even his own lawyer did not understand what haloperidol is, he ended up being charged with drug trafficking. So, and then remember, he's a person with disability. He's entitled to expedite hearings. So what happens, his case, how do you end up 3 years in remand? And of the last year, there was no mention, there was no hearing. No one in industrial area remand noticed that this guy hasn't gone to court for a whole year. Even the judge handling the case did not notice.
So would I be right to say that is also ignorance to some degree?
No, it's not ignorance. It's the stereotype of who wants to deal with a disabled person. This guy came to court the first day. He was screaming and howling and breaking things. No one wants to deal with that. Not the prisons department for sure. How do you get him into the bus so that he can go to court when he's busy beating your officers? Once you get him to court, where do you hold him? He's violent. He's beating other people as well. And then when you take him to court, remember, he's howling and screaming. The judge is like, this is too much. Get him out of my court, take him to Madhare.
Yes.
Yeah. It took 6 months for him to get a mental assessment. 6 months, something that is supposed to take 24 hours, you know. And even after the mental assessment, and this is now where the lawyer comes in, the lawyer wasn't following up on these issues, because you're thinking, I can't even get instructions from my client to represent him. I don't know how to represent him. So you as a lawyer, you're like, chana na hiyo mambo. Yeah.
So when he died, because you know individuals who have this disability require often medical checkup because they get complications very easily.
Yeah.
It's okay. So was it a complication or was it the exposure to facilities in the prison that did not suit his health? And
it is all of that. Because again, remember, the first question you asked me was, what do they do?
Yeah.
That's the thing, nothing. There is nothing. You see, like other prisoners will go and make number plates, go and do, I don't know, take them to the farm, clean the hospitals. I mean, you've seen prisoners doing things around.
Yeah.
Persons with disabilities are not allowed to do anything.
Yeah. So now, when they are not allowed to do anything, it means they are going to be sitting for a longer part of the day. But that, if you are left here for, say, in this block to sit for even a week, you're going to go crazy. Like, it stresses you. It
stresses, it causes trauma. And remember, you're not, some of the prisons that we reviewed, I'll not mention them because I think I've just demonized the government too much right now. But one thing we noticed is the prisons, there are only 3 psychiatrists that visit 3 particular prisons, and they do it once a week.
And how many prisons do we have in this country?
Yeah. We have about 127 prisons in Kenya. Yeah. But there are only 3 that have access to our psychiatrists. And in most cases, like some of the prisons we went to, they're like, we only see the psychiatrist once a month.
That's not enough.
Yeah. But no counseling services, no rehab. And you know, especially for persons with intellectual disabilities, they need occupational therapy. This work that they do, going to the shamba to farm, you know, cleaning dishes, preparing the lunch and things like that, it's literally occupational therapy for them. It helps to keep them sane. But now you expect this person who has different levels of anxiety to sit all day and do nothing without any support services. Yeah. And you're surprised why they would get suicidal in prison.
You would.
Yeah. Or they get aggressive, or they now actually turn into criminals. They actually become murderers.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you're like, if you put them in this environment, which you know is not helping them in any way, what else do you expect as an outcome?
Yeah.
Yeah. And not just for the prisoners themselves. It's also for the prison officers who take care of them.
Yeah.
We actually recorded several mental health conditions amongst prison officers, but they weren't aware, or maybe they were aware, they didn't want to deal with it. But we did see that a lot of the prison officers who were taking care of offenders with mental disabilities, also them developed psychosocial disabilities. Yeah.
Because also it's traumatizing for you when you are put in a situation where you're dealing with an individual who has a problem, and you see them experience that kind of breakdown. Yeah. It's also going to be traumatizing for you. Yeah. And then you have to deal with on, and nobody is preparing you for what you're going to deal with. Okay, so tell me, what are some of the roles of Article 48? What do you do?
The thing about Article 48 is that we are literally at the end of the line. We're a specialist legal organization that provides legal services only. Yeah. So, but remember, we found ourselves in an environment where there's no system, there's nothing. So what we do is we try to link up persons with mental offenders, ex-offenders, persons with mental disabilities who might end up in the system or are at risk of ending up in the system. So we link them up to other organizations that provide direct support services, you know. So, because we're lawyers, we don't know what to do. Yeah. apart from our legal services. The other thing we also do is we provide training, lots and lots of trainings. Like I said, by the time you're looking for Article 48, it means there's been a lot of system failure. So we try to train families, persons with disabilities, caregivers, and various government agencies to understand disability from a legal perspective, so that when you end up in the court system, you know what to do. Yeah, because you realize there's a lot of ignorance about disability and the law. So if by training someone to be able to understand the law, they can sort of protect themselves and prevent some potential legal outcomes.
And they can also understand that some of these things you can also kind of like represent yourself, because you know how certain laws work.
And finally, one of the things we do, and this one usually is our core business, is that we teach people with disabilities and their caregivers and their families and communities about rights. Because when we started working in disability rights, we kept getting this idea, this notion that persons with disabilities don't have rights. So, like a lot of our clients always come like, but how can I go to court? How can I challenge this? How can I demand for my salary? But you're like, it's your right. Demand for it, you know. So it's literally our core business. Every time we work with persons with disabilities, the first thing we do is we teach them, you are a person. Imagine it sorts out everything else from there. Once people understand that they're a person and they have rights, even training them on protecting themselves and prevention and representing themselves becomes way easier. And even now when you train government agencies, we don't do the training ourselves. The people who have trained to understand their rights, imagine they become trainers and they go and do the training themselves.
So I think there's a previous conversation that we had that you mentioned that you also do community reintegration. So I was curious, why are you doing community reintegration and for whom?
The reason why we got into community reintegration was because we realized when you go to Kamiti, Madare and all of that, you find people who've been in the system so long that they don't know. they don't know how life works anymore, you know. So even if we go to court, represent them, help them get out and things like that, yet you're releasing them to what? To a community that doesn't understand them, doesn't accept them, and will most likely lead to them going back to prison. So we realize as much as we are lawyers, we do have to engage in the reintegration process, so that we're not just representing people to get them out, only for them to come back through a revolving door.
And now, how do you do this? Do you use the same trainers that you already have to go back into the...
It usually comes tricky. I can't tell you that there's one method we use, but largely what we do is that we link up we work through a series of agencies. Sometimes we work through government agencies, like the Department of Probation and Aftercare is really crucial for us. Probation and aftercare are the ones that help to resettle someone once you're released from prison. And you know, they already have an amazing network out there. The probation officers are quite understanding, and literally they're social workers. They've been trained to understand community involvement. So probation and aftercare, we work with them a lot, especially when you're dealing with offenders who have been in the system for too long. We also work very closely with the community itself and the family. Remember, in most cases, you'll find the family community does not understand mental disability. So before we take up a case and all of that, we always look into the family. What kind of situation are we dealing with here? Do they need some capacity building to understand how to support this person once they come back from the system and everything? And we also link them up to other NGOs that carry out such work. Like we work very closely with an organization known as Camellia organization. Camellia, it's largely medical in their approach, but you realize someone has been in prison without access to their medication, to treatment and things like that. And not just their mental side of treatment, even their physical. You know, they haven't seen a doctor in years. So you don't, and some of them have other health conditions, diabetes, whatever. So Camellia organization is very crucial because of that, because you know, they keep both the mental and physical wellness of the person in check. And they also help with community reintegration because they do have some aspects of social work. There are other NGOs we also link up with just to help with the reintegration. But as it's mostly from the legal side of things, to make sure that we identify laws that will help this person reintegrate. Like one of my favorite laws is when you talk about reintegration, everybody talks about the probation and aftercare guidelines. But with persons with disabilities, did you know that the National Council for Persons with Disabilities has a mandate to reintegrate offenders with disabilities back into the community, including providing housing for them?
No. No, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I actually didn't even think it's their responsibility to take care of people who are
Exactly.
offenders who have come from.
Yeah, because most people just look at the traditional disability sense. So as we go an extra mile, like we look into the health laws, we look into the criminal laws, we look into the education laws and see where can we find opportunities that will help to reintegrate this person.
So it's an all-round reintegration.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So the one question that I want to ask you, I have to ask you is, although we've talked about a myriad of laws that are so unaccommodating, what are some of the laws that you feel like these ones get to my last nerve? You know, like, okay, there are so many laws that are unaccommodating, but this one carry the day. Like, just even one or two.
Oh, I'll give you two. The Criminal Procedure Code and the Mental Health Act and Bill at the same time. They all drive me nuts because literally they do not consider the person. They do not look at things from a human rights model or perspective. And so, and they literally perpetuate the stereotype on mental disability.
Yeah.
So if you ask me, if we're to start by amending laws, those two must go. Yeah.
Okay, now the final, as in I need to go and think about this whole interview because I feel that we are going to have another interview, but I need to go and sleep on this interview. Because I was ready, but I was not ready for what I've gotten. But finally, let's give the government their due. Would you say that through your advocacy, there are things that the government has come through and helped to change? And if yes, what are they?
I wouldn't say through our advocacy.
But you know, it's through you, like, okay.
Well, we have noted some key changes, like they're not, I know people wouldn't say they're big, but for us it's a big win. Like working with the children's department, just to help people see disability for what it is and not what they think it should be. We've actually seen improvements. Like I remember there was one time children with, there was a particular group of children who would be taken from a rehab center and just taken to be drugged and brought back. So they can sleep, they stop disturbing us for the rest of the day.
Oh, so like in the morning, they are put in a van, go be drugged, come back to sleep.
Yeah.
All right.
So we managed to work with this particular remand home and change the perception on disability, introduce aspects of dieting and occupational therapy and things like that. And those kids don't need drugs anymore. Okay, some of them still do, but at least
not to sleep the entire day.
Not to sleep the entire day. They're actually becoming productive members of society. Department of Probation and Aftercare. It's amazing how much information is in that department. And remember, these are guys who are working without resources. It's not even their job to deal with disability, but it was sort of put into that department. But they've learned so much through the years. They have a lot of documents, resource, and knowledge resource, that is, with zero funding to reintegrate persons with disabilities back into the community. Those are the two I would highlight. But there's still a lot of work to be done.
But at least it's it's something to write home about, given that the system is so broken. So it's something to commend the government and the system about. So when you talk about being your own child's advocate, what does it really mean, or what does it mean to you?
Wow. Now this is where my law and personal life collide in a good way, though. Because one of the lessons I've learned is, as much as we do talk about the law, we train people about the law, you have to practice it in your daily life. And how does it look like in your daily life? It's even small things.
It's all right.
No, it's in small things like, Do you know, let me backtrack a little bit. You interact with the law on a daily basis. It's just that you don't take cognizance of it. For instance, I had to learn, my child is on a special diet. I have a child who we use diet therapy to help her alleviate some of the symptoms of autism. And I've actually seen it work. But when we look at, it took me a while to find the right foods, the right ingredients, and the right things to help her with her diet. Because one of the, and how this really affected me, because I'm like, here I am being told, don't do gluten, don't do milk, don't do this, don't do this. And I'm like, okay, so what is she supposed to eat?
Yeah.
I am very confused
What
at
are
this
the
point.
alternatives?
What are the alternatives, you know? And now I'm becoming a mother.
Yeah.
And then I remember a friend of mine, Jane, the one you interviewed previously, she was like, surely you're a lawyer, use your head.
Yeah.
You know. And I'm so grateful for that advice, because then I was like, no, my child deserves better. I deserve this information. It's my right to the information. It's the right of my child to a good health and everything. So, but you find a lot of people are locking that information from us. So I would literally go, I harassed a couple of nutritionists. I'm so sorry, because I know I harassed them.
On air, you're sorry.
Yeah. Basically just to get the right information on what exactly do I need to put into my child's diet to help her with her autism. And that's how we ended up now starting a bakery on the side, you know.
Oh, you have a bakery?
Yeah. A bakery that caters specifically for special diets and things like that. Yeah. And also ended up becoming a very big self-advocate for my child and myself about healthy eating and healthy living, you know. So why am I saying this? Because parents, I can't encourage you enough. Forget about the law for a minute, and before you jump on the law, just be a parent. Like, what future do you want your child to have? How are you ensuring that your child has the best chances in life, and advocate for that?
Yes.
Yeah. So in your day-to-day living, in your community, and of course when it gets a little bit complex, look for us lawyers. We'll help you out with that.
That is all for today. That was an interview that was really intense for me because it put my mind on an overdrive. So we'll leave it here for now, but I'm confident that we're going to host her back. If you have any questions that you want us to ask Felicia about, please don't hesitate to send us an email or leave them in the comment section.
Okay.